It was one of those quiet evenings when the hospital finally exhaled. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above the nearly empty hallway, and Emily Carter, a night shift nurse, stepped outside for the first real breath she'd taken in hours. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and freshly cut grass from the small park beside the hospital. Her feet ached. Her mind replayed the day's moments, worried families, tired doctors, the fragile rhythm of monitors beeping beside sleeping patients. She walked toward the same bench she always used during breaks. But tonight she wasn't alone. A golden retriever sat near the path, perfectly still. At first Emily thought it belonged to someone nearby. But there was no leash, no owner, no movement except the slow wag of its tail. Then the dog stood. It walked directly toward her. Emily froze slightly as the retriever stopped just inches away, looking up at her with deep, searching eyes. "Hey there," she murmured softly. But the dog didn't want pets. Instead it turned, walked toward the bench, then looked back. Waiting. Emily frowned. The dog barked once. Soft. Urgent. Then it trotted a few steps forward again, glancing back as if to say, "Follow me." Emily hesitated. "Are you trying to show me something?" The retriever whined quietly and pawed at the wooden bench. Emily stepped closer. And that's when she noticed something lying on the seat. A small white envelope. The dog sat down beside it, tail gently sweeping the ground, watching her carefully. Emily slowly picked it up. Her name was written on the front. Her heart skipped. But what the dog sensed was far from ordinary. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The hospital finally grew quiet after midnight. Not silent. Hospitals were never truly silent. Machines hummed softly behind closed doors. A distant monitor beeped in steady rhythm. Footsteps echoed now and then down long fluorescent hallways. But compared to the chaos of the day, it felt almost peaceful. Emily Carter leaned against the nurse's station counter and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Her shift had started 14 hours earlier. A long one, even for a night nurse. She glanced down at the clipboard in her hand, then placed it gently on the desk. "Emily," a tired voice called from behind her. Dr. Morales stepped out of one of the rooms, pulling off his gloves. "You should take a break," he said. "You've been running non-stop." Emily gave a small smile. "I'm okay." He raised an eyebrow. "You say that every night." She exhaled quietly. Maybe he was right. Her shoulders ached. Her feet felt like stone. And the day's moments still echoed in her mind. A worried mother gripping her son's hand. An elderly patient asking the same question again and again. "Will I be all right?" Emily always answered the same way. Gently. Kindly. "Let's take it one step at a time." But tonight, the words had felt heavier than usual. Dr. Morales gave her a small nod toward the exit doors. "Go," he said. 10 minutes. Fresh air. Emily hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right." She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the locker room door. The moment she stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around her like a quiet blanket. She inhaled slowly, deep. The faint scent of rain drifted through the air. Somewhere nearby, freshly cut grass carried a soft, earthy smell. The hospital sat beside a small park. Nothing fancy. Just a few trees, a narrow walking path, and a wooden bench under an old oak tree. Emily walked there almost every night. It had become a quiet ritual. 10 minutes. Sometimes 15 if things were slow. Just enough time to reset her thoughts before returning to the constant rhythm inside the building. Tonight the sky was clear. Stars shimmered faintly above the city lights. The parking lot was half empty. Most of the day staff had gone home hours ago. Emily slipped her hands into her jacket pockets and walked along the narrow path toward the bench. Her shoes crunched softly on the gravel. The oak tree came into view first. Tall. Still. Its branches swayed gently in the light wind. And beneath it sat the bench. The same one she always used. Emily slowed her steps. Something was different tonight. First she couldn't tell what. Then she saw it. A dog. A golden retriever sat near the path. Perfectly still. Its coat shimmered faintly in the pale glow of a nearby street lamp. Emily stopped walking. "Hey there," she murmured softly. The dog didn't move. simply watched her. Its ears were slightly forward, tail resting calmly on the ground. Not tense, not afraid, just waiting. Emily glanced around the park. No one else was there. No leash, no owner. She took a few slow steps closer. The dog's tail gave a gentle wag. "Did someone forget you out here?" Her voice was soft. The retriever tilted its head slightly. Emily crouched down a little, resting her hands on her knees. "You lost, buddy?" Normally stray dogs kept their distance, especially near hospitals. Too many sounds, too many strangers. But this one didn't back away. Instead, it stood. Slowly, the retriever walked toward her. Not running, not cautious, just steady, calm steps along the gravel path. Emily remained still. When the dog reached her, it stopped just inches away, close enough that she could see the warm brown color of its eyes. They were calm, focused, almost thoughtful. She extended a hand gently. "Hi." But the dog didn't lean forward for a pet. It didn't sniff her fingers. Instead, it turned, then walked toward the bench. Emily blinked. "Well, all right." The dog stopped halfway there. It looked back at her, waiting. Emily frowned slightly. "Do you want me to follow you?" The retriever's tail wagged once. Slow, patient. Emily hesitated. It felt oddly intentional. But she walked forward anyway. The dog continued toward the bench beneath the oak tree. When it reached the bench, it stopped. Then it barked. One short bark. Not loud. Just enough to break the quiet night. Emily stepped closer. "What is it?" The retriever placed its front paws gently against the wooden bench, then dropped back down. Its nose nudged the seat. Emily's brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" The dog pawed lightly at the wood. Scratch, scratch. Then it stepped back and looked up at her. The movement was deliberate, almost purposeful. Emily moved beside the bench. At first she didn't see anything, just the worn wooden slats she'd sat on dozens of nights before. Then, she noticed something. A small white envelope, resting near the center of the bench. Emily froze. That wasn't there earlier. She reached for it slowly. The retriever sat down beside her. Its tail brushed softly across the gravel. Back and forth, back and forth. Emily picked up the envelope. It was slightly thick, like a card inside. Her eyes moved to the front, and her breath caught. Her name was written there, in careful handwriting. Emily Carter. She stared at it, confused. "Okay, that's strange." She turned the envelope over. No return address, just the sealed flap. The retriever watched her closely. Its ears lifted slightly, as if waiting. Emily looked down at the dog. "You know something about this?" The retriever didn't move, just watched her, patient. Emily's fingers slid beneath the flap. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a folded card. Plain, simple. She slowly pulled it out. But before she could open it, a strange feeling passed through her chest. Like recognition, like something important was about to surface. Emily glanced at the dog again. The retriever's eyes never left her. Its tail moved gently against the ground, waiting, quietly, patiently. Emily unfolded the card, and the moment she saw the first line, her heart skipped. But what the dog sensed that night was far from ordinary. Emily stared at the folded card in her hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have. The night air brushed softly against her face, but for a moment she forgot about the breeze, the trees, even the quiet hospital behind her. Her eyes moved slowly to the first line. But before she could read further, a soft sound interrupted her. A small whine. Emily glanced down. The golden retriever was still sitting beside the bench, watching her. Its tail moved slowly across the gravel, back and forth, patient, almost as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Emily lowered the card slightly. "You're a strange one, aren't you?" The dog tilted its head. Its ears shifted forward. Not playful, not restless, just attentive. Emily looked around the park again. Still empty. No footsteps on the path. No voices. Just the quiet rustle of leaves above the oak tree. "Did someone leave this here for me?" she murmured. The retriever stood, It stepped closer to the bench and gently nudged Emily's arm with its nose. A soft push. Not demanding, just reminding her. Emily blinked. Okay. She looked back at the card. The handwriting was neat, careful, the kind of writing that came from someone who took their time with every letter. Her eyes moved over the first sentence, and suddenly her breathing slowed, but the retriever shifted again. Restless now. It circled once beside the bench, then sat again, closer this time. Emily glanced at it. You're not going anywhere, are you? The dog's tail thumped lightly against the ground. Once, twice. Emily exhaled softly. She folded the card halfway closed again. All right, hold on. She looked toward the hospital building. The glowing windows looked distant from the park. Almost peaceful. Her break probably had only a few minutes left. But something about this moment, this strange dog, and the card in her hand, made time feel slower. She rested back against the bench. The wood creaked gently beneath her weight. The retriever immediately stood again, then climbed halfway onto the gravel beside her feet. Close. Very close. Emily raised an eyebrow. You like personal space, huh? The dog didn't answer, of course, but it placed its chin gently against the edge of the bench, right beside her knee. Emily looked down at it. For the first time she really studied the dog. Its coat was clean, well brushed. The golden fur along its neck was slightly darker than the rest. Its eyes were calm, wise almost, and there was something else. A quiet focus. This dog wasn't wandering. It wasn't lost. It was here on purpose. Emily felt the realization settle slowly in her chest. You brought me here. The retriever's ears lifted slightly. Emily leaned forward. You led me to the bench. The dog's tail moved once more. Slow. Deliberate. Emily looked back at the card in her hands. Did someone send you? The retriever suddenly stood again. This time it walked a few steps away from the bench, then stopped. It looked back at her, waiting. Emily frowned. What now? The dog barked softly, not loud, just a quick, gentle sound. Then it walked back toward her again. Its nose tapped the card in her hand. Emily blinked. You want me to read it? The retriever sat down, right in front of her. Eyes steady. Still. The message was clear. Emily laughed quietly under her breath. Well, all right then. She opened the card fully. The paper unfolded with a soft rustle. The retriever remained completely still, its attention never drifting away from her face. Emily began reading silently. The first few words made her brow tighten slightly. Then something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Faint, but growing. Her eyes moved across the page again. Slower this time. The night breeze lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. She didn't notice. Her mind had gone somewhere else. Somewhere inside the hospital. A room. A quiet voice. A memory she hadn't thought about in days. Emily lowered the card slightly. Her eyes unfocused as if replaying something distant. The retriever noticed. It stepped closer again. Its nose nudged her wrist gently. Emily blinked. Oh! She looked down at the dog again. Wait a second. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying the retriever more carefully now. The shape of its ears. The gentle curve of its muzzle. Something about it felt familiar, but she couldn't quite place it yet. Emily turned the card over again. Inside was something else. A small photograph had slipped partially from the fold. It rested against the inside corner of the card. Emily pulled it out carefully. The photo was slightly worn, as if it had been handled many times. She held it up under the streetlight and froze. In the picture, the same golden retriever sat beside an elderly man in a wheelchair. The man's hand rested gently on the dog's head. Both of them were facing the camera, but the man's smile. Emily felt her chest tighten. I know him. The realization hit slowly, like pieces of a puzzle finally connecting. Her mind searched through the past week. The hospital rooms. The patients she'd cared for. And then, a quiet voice returned to her memory. Thank you, nurse. Emily inhaled sharply. No way. She looked back at the dog. You belong to him, don't you? The retriever's tail began wagging again. Soft. Steady. Emily stared at the photo again. The The man looked older in the picture. Thin, kind eyes. And suddenly Emily remembered the room. Room 214. The late-night conversations. The quiet patient who rarely asked for anything. Her heart began beating faster. Mr. Lawson. She whispered the name aloud. The retriever's ears lifted instantly. Emily's breath caught. Oh my gosh. She looked from the dog to the photograph, then back to the card. A strange warmth mixed with confusion filled her chest. But he was discharged. At least that's what she thought. She hadn't seen his name on the patient board for days. The retriever stepped closer again. Its head rested gently against her leg. Emily looked down at the dog. Why are you here? The retriever didn't answer. It simply stayed beside her. Still. Patient. As if the most important part of the message had not yet been understood. Emily slowly unfolded the card again. Her eyes moved back to the message. This time, she read every word carefully. And with each sentence, her heart began to understand something she wasn't ready to hear. The night suddenly felt quieter than before. The hospital lights flickered faintly in the distance. And beside the bench, the golden retriever waited, because the story behind that card was only just beginning to reveal itself. Emily held the card carefully beneath the soft glow of the street lamp. The paper trembled slightly in her hands, not because of the wind, because of the quiet feeling growing inside her chest. The golden retriever sat beside her, still, watchful. Its tail brushed slowly across the gravel, back and forth, as if it understood that something important was unfolding. Emily swallowed softly. Then she began reading again. Slowly this time. Every word. Every line. The handwriting was careful. A little uneven. The kind that came from someone whose hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The first line read, Dear Emily. She paused. Her eyes softened slightly. Patients almost never used nurses' first names in letters. They usually wrote to the night nurse, or to the staff who helped me. But this felt personal. She continued reading. You probably don't expect a letter from me. Truth is, I never planned to write one either. Emily felt the corner of her mouth move slightly. A faint smile. That voice. She could almost hear it. Quiet. Gentle. The same tone the elderly man had used during those long overnight hours in room 214. The golden retriever shifted beside her. It leaned its head gently against the edge of the bench. Emily kept reading. But some things shouldn't stay unspoken. The night air moved softly through the oak tree above her. Leaves rustled quietly, almost like a whisper. Emily turned the page slightly to catch more light from the lamp. You see, nurses meet a lot of people. Hundreds of faces. Thousands maybe. Most of us become just another patient in the hallway of your memory. Emily exhaled slowly. The retriever's ears flicked slightly, as if it recognized the sound of her breath changing. Emily's eyes moved to the next line. But I want you to know, you weren't just another nurse. She stopped reading. Her gaze lifted toward the dark sky for a moment. A strange warmth pressed against her chest. Memories began surfacing quietly. Small moments. Little conversations she hadn't thought about since the previous week. Room 214. The soft yellow light above the hospital bed. The steady ticking of the old man's wristwatch resting on the table beside him. Long night again? He had asked once. Emily remembered smiling. They're all long nights. He had chuckled softly, then nodded toward the window. At least you get the quiet hours. Emily had shrugged. Quiet doesn't always mean easy. The retriever nudged her arm again. A gentle reminder. Emily blinked and looked back down at the card. Sorry, she murmured softly. Got distracted. The dog sat back down. Content. Emily continued reading. Those last few nights in the hospital, they were difficult ones. You probably knew that. Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the card. She did know. Mr. Lawson had been admitted quietly. No family visitors. No constant phone calls. Just the steady routine of medications, tests, and long hours of silence. But he had never complained. Not once. Emily's eyes moved across the next lines. But every night you walked into that room, you spoke to me like I still mattered. Her throat tightened. She remembered that too. The way he always tried to sit up when she entered. The way he insisted on thanking her every single time she adjusted his blankets. "You don't have to do that," she had told him once. He had smiled. "Yes, I do." Emily continued reading. "You talk to me about ordinary things. The weather. Your coffee being too strong. The dog you wished you had time to adopt someday." Emily froze. Her eyes moved slowly to the retriever sitting beside her. The dog was watching her again. Patient. Calm. Almost knowing. Emily whispered quietly, "Oh my goodness." The retriever's tail moved again. Emily returned to the card. Her heart was beating faster now. "You probably didn't realize it, but those conversations meant everything to me." The wind moved gently across the park. Somewhere far away, a car passed along the quiet road beyond the hospital. Emily continued, "Hospitals can feel very lonely, especially when the nights grow quiet. But you never let the room feel empty." Emily blinked several times. The words felt heavier now. Not sad exactly, but full. Full of something warm. Something human. The retriever shifted again and rested its head against her knee. Emily placed one hand gently on the dog's head without even thinking. Its fur was soft, warm, comforting. She continued reading. "I know nurses don't always see what happens after patients leave." Emily nodded slightly. That was true. Patients were discharged, transferred, moved to other facilities. The story usually ended there. "But I wanted to make sure you heard this one last thing." Emily's breathing slowed. The retriever's tail stopped moving now. Completely still. As if the dog already knew what came next. Emily read the next line. And her heart quietly sank. "By the time you read this, I will probably be gone." Emily's hand froze against the dog's fur. The night air suddenly felt colder. She looked down at the card again. Then read the line one more time. Slowly. Carefully. "Gone." The retriever lifted its head slightly. It watched her face. "Waiting." Emily whispered under her breath. "No." Her mind raced. She hadn't checked room 214 in days. The patient board changed constantly. Discharges happened all the time. But somehow, something about this felt different. Her eyes moved quickly to the next paragraph. "Don't be sad. Life is meant to end the way a good story does." Quietly, and with gratitude, Emily closed her eyes briefly. A slow breath escaped her. The retriever nudged her arm again. Gentle. Comforting. Emily looked down at the dog. "You knew, didn't you?" The retriever blinked calmly. Its ears relaxed. And for the first time since she'd met the dog, Emily realized something else. Something she hadn't noticed earlier. There was a small leather collar around its neck. Attached to it was a tiny metal tag. The tag caught the streetlight as the dog shifted slightly. Emily leaned closer. She turned the tag carefully. And read the engraving. "Buddy." Her heart tightened again. "Buddy." The retriever wagged its tail. Just once. Emily looked down at the photograph again. The elderly man. His hand resting on the dog's head. And now everything felt clearer. Buddy hadn't wandered here by accident. He hadn't gotten lost. He had come here for a reason. Emily looked back at the card. There was still more to read. Much more. And somehow, she already knew the next words would explain everything. The retriever sat quietly beside her. Patient. Faithful. As if completing the final task someone had trusted him to finish. Emily sat very still on the wooden bench. The card rested open in her hands. The photograph lay beside it. And Buddy, the golden retriever, remained close at her side. The park felt quieter now. Even the wind had softened. For a long moment, Emily didn't read another word. Her mind had drifted somewhere else. Back inside the hospital. Back through the long hallway. Past the nurse's station. Toward a door she had walked through many times. Room 214. She could see it clearly. The soft yellow light. The faint smell of antiseptic and old books. Mr. Lawson had always kept a small paperback on the bedside table. He rarely read it, but he liked having it there. Emily remembered the first night she met him. He had arrived late, near the end of her shift. Quiet admission. No ambulance sirens. No panic. Just a slow wheelchair rolling through the hallway. A thin man wrapped in a gray blanket. His eyes had moved around the room carefully, taking everything in. Emily had stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Good evening, Mr. Lawson. I'm Emily. I'll be your nurse tonight." He had nodded politely. "Good evening, Emily." His voice had been calm, soft, almost thoughtful, as if he chose each word carefully before speaking it. Emily remembered adjusting the pillows behind his back. "Let's get you comfortable." Mr. Lawson had looked around the quiet room. Then he asked a question that had caught her slightly off guard. "Do you enjoy working nights?" Emily had laughed quietly. "That depends on the night." He smiled. A warm, tired smile. Fair answer. The memory faded slowly. Emily blinked and looked down at the card again. Buddy shifted closer beside her. His head rested against her leg. Emily placed her hand gently on his fur again. "You stayed with him, didn't you?" she whispered. Buddy's tail brushed softly across the gravel. Emily continued reading the card. "My dog Buddy has been my best friend for almost 10 years. Her eyes moved briefly to the retriever. Buddy's ears twitched slightly. "He has been beside me through everything. Good years, hard years, and the quiet ones in between." Emily nodded slowly. That sounded exactly like the man she remembered. Mr. Lawson had often spoken about his dog during those night conversations. Not long stories, just little mentions. "Buddy loves the park in the mornings." Or, "He never liked thunderstorms." Emily remembered bringing him a glass of water one night. He had looked out the window toward the small park beside the hospital. "I used to walk Buddy there every evening." Emily had followed his gaze. "That park?" He nodded. "Same bench every day." Emily felt her breath catch slightly. The bench beneath her creaked softly as she shifted her weight. The oak tree above rustled quietly. She looked around the park again. The path, the grass, the exact bench he had once described. And Buddy had brought her here. Emily lowered her eyes back to the card. "When I realized my time was growing short, I started thinking about the people who had made those last days easier." Emily swallowed. Buddy's breathing was slow and calm beside her. Emily continued. "You may not remember every patient, Emily. That's normal. Your job asks you to carry many stories at once." She exhaled quietly. That part was true. Faces blurred together sometimes. Names faded. But certain patients stayed. For reasons that were hard to explain. Mr. Lawson had been one of them. Just quietly. Emily remembered another night. The hospital had been unusually calm. She had entered room 214 to check his vitals. Mr. Lawson had been staring at the ceiling. "Everything all right?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Just thinking." "About what?" He had turned his head toward her. "About how strange life is." Emily had smiled politely. "That's a big topic for 2 in the morning." He chuckled softly. "Yes, it is." Then he added something she would never forget. "Most people spend their lives chasing big moments." Emily had adjusted the 4-line gently. "And you don't." Mr. Lawson shook his head. "No. I've learned something different." "What's that?" He looked toward the window again. "The small moments are the ones that stay." Emily had thought about those words later that night, long after her shift ended. Now sitting here beside Buddy, those words felt heavier, more meaningful. Emily read the next lines in the card. "You brought those small moments into that hospital room." Her throat tightened slightly. "You never rushed our conversations. You never treated me like just another patient." Buddy lifted his head briefly. His eyes met Emily's. Calm, kind, almost proud. Emily continued reading. "I knew you were tired some nights. I could see it in the way you leaned against the door frame." Emily smiled faintly. Mr. Lawson had noticed everything, even the things she tried to hide. "But you always stayed a few minutes longer. Just to talk." Emily blinked slowly. She hadn't thought those moments mattered much. They were just small kindnesses, part of the job. But now, reading his words, she realized how deeply they had been felt. Buddy shifted again and placed his head gently on her knee. Emily rubbed behind his ears. "You're a good boy," she murmured. The retriever closed his eyes briefly. Content. Emily looked down at the photograph again. Mr. Lawson's hand resting on Buddy's head. the warmth in his smile, the quiet bond between them. Then her eyes moved back to the card. There was still another page. The final page. And something about the careful way the paper had been folded told her one thing. The most important part of the message was still waiting to be read. Buddy lifted his head again. His ears turned toward her. Waiting. Faithful. As if he had carried this moment across miles of memory, just to make sure she would hear the rest of the story. The final page of the card felt different. Slightly thicker. As if the weight of the message had settled there. Emily stared at it for a moment before unfolding it. Her fingers moved slowly. Carefully. Buddy shifted beside her on the gravel. The retriever's posture had changed. His back was straight now. Alert. Waiting. Almost like a student who already knew the lesson, but still wanted to hear it spoken. Emily drew a quiet breath. Then she began reading. I asked the hospital staff for one small favor. The sentence was simple, but something about it made Emily's chest tighten. Her eyes moved to the next line. I asked them to make sure Buddy found you. Emily blinked. She looked down at the golden retriever. Buddy watched her calmly. His tail moved once. Slow. Steady. You did find me, she whispered. The retriever leaned gently against her leg. Emily continued reading. You once told me you liked to sit on a bench in the park during your breaks. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She had said that. Casually. One night while checking his blood pressure. I go outside sometimes, she had mentioned. There's a bench under the big oak tree. Mr. Lawson had nodded thoughtfully. That sounds like a peaceful place. Emily had shrugged. It helps clear my head. Now she understood why he had asked. Her eyes returned to the card. I remembered that bench. And I remembered how you said it helped you breathe for a few minutes before going back to work. Emily's throat tightened. Buddy's ears flicked gently at the sound of the night wind. Emily read the next line. And suddenly the truth settled into place. So I made a plan. Her heart beat a little faster. The day before I left the hospital, I asked my neighbor to bring Buddy to the park. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Her mind pictured the quiet old man sitting in his hospital bed, planning this small act with the patience of someone who knew time was short. Buddy knows this park well. We walked here every evening for years. Emily glanced around the darkened park again. The familiar path. The bench. The oak tree swaying gently above them. Buddy's world. His routine. It all made sense now. Emily read further. I asked my neighbor to place this card on the bench. Then I asked him to let Buddy do the rest. The retriever lifted his head slightly. His eyes reflected the streetlight. Emily shook her head softly in amazement. You walked here, didn't you? Buddy's tail brushed the gravel. Once. Twice. Emily smiled faintly. He trusted you to finish the job. The retriever blinked slowly. Emily returned to the card. Buddy has always had a good memory. He knows where the bench is. And he remembers the scent of the people who show him kindness. Emily's eyes softened. She looked down at the dog beside her. Is that how you found me? Buddy tilted his head slightly. Emily could almost imagine him recognizing her scent from the hospital corridors. From the nights she had sat beside Mr. Lawson's bed. From the quiet kindness that had lingered in the air. Emily continued reading. If everything worked the way I hoped, Buddy would guide you there. Her chest felt warm now. Heavy, but warm. And when you found the card, I hoped it would remind you of something important. Emily swallowed softly. The retriever's breathing remained slow and steady beside her. The night felt still. Almost reverent. Like the world itself had paused for this moment. Emily read the next lines. Kindness doesn't disappear after a moment passes. It travels. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. Her eyes grew slightly glassy. Buddy shifted closer. His shoulder pressed gently against her leg. Comforting. Emily continued. During my final days in that hospital room, I watched many people pass through those halls. Doctors. Nurses. Families. Emily pictured the busy corridor again. The quiet flow of life and worry moving through the hospital doors. Most were doing their jobs. But you did something more. Emily felt her throat tighten again. You reminded me that I was still a person. The words sat quietly on the page. Simple. Honest. Powerful. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Her mind returned to those quiet conversations. The nights she had lingered for just a few minutes longer. The ordinary talk about weather, coffee, and dogs. Moments she had never thought twice about. But to Mr. Lawson, they had meant everything. Emily opened her eyes again. She finished reading the final paragraph. So this is my way of saying thank you. Not just for the medicine. Not just for the care. But for the kindness you carried into that room. Buddy lifted his head again. His tail began moving slowly, as if he already knew the final words were near. Emily read the last lines. Please take care of Buddy tonight. He will probably look for me for a little while. Emily's hand moved instinctively to the dog's neck. She rubbed behind his ears. You're not alone, she whispered. Buddy leaned closer. His eyes closed briefly. Emily finished the letter. But I believe he will recognize a good heart when he sees one. And I believe he has already found it. Emily lowered the card slowly. The park felt very quiet. The hospital lights glowed softly in the distance. For a moment she simply sat there, processing everything. The plan. The trust. The gentle goodbye written by a man who had faced the end of his story with quiet grace. Buddy rested his chin on her knee again. Patient. Faithful. Emily looked down at him. You walked all this way to bring me that message. The retriever's tail brushed softly against the gravel. Emily smiled through the emotion rising in her chest. Well, she whispered gently. I guess I'm not letting you walk away alone now. Buddy looked up at her. And in that quiet moment beneath the oak tree, the truth of the letter settled fully into her heart. Mr. Lawson had said goodbye. But somehow, his kindness had stayed behind. Right there on the bench, waiting, carried faithfully by the dog who loved him most. For a long time, Emily didn't move. The card rested quietly in her hands. The last word still lingered in her mind. Kindness travels. The sentence repeated itself softly inside her thoughts. Buddy remained beside her on the gravel. Calm. Patient. The oak tree above them swayed gently in the night wind. A few leaves drifted down, brushing against the bench. Emily finally exhaled. A slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She folded the card carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then she looked down at Buddy. You really carried this all the way here, didn't you? The retriever's tail moved once. Soft. Steady. Emily studied his face again. His eyes were calm, but there was something else there. A quiet searching. As if part of him was still looking for the person he had always walked beside. She rubbed the back of his neck gently. You miss him. Buddy leaned into her hand. Just slightly. Emily looked out across the empty park. The bench creaked softly as she shifted. It was strange. Only 20 minutes earlier this had been just another break during another long shift. A routine moment. 10 quiet minutes before returning to the hospital floor. Now everything felt different. Heavier but also clearer. Emily thought about Mr. Lawson's words again. You reminded me that I was still a person. Her chest tightened. Working in a hospital could slowly change how time felt. Days blurred together. Patients arrived. Patients left. Sometimes they recovered. Sometimes they didn't. Nurses learned how to keep moving forward. But somewhere along the way, it was easy to forget how deeply the smallest moments could matter. Emily looked down at Buddy again. You know, he talked about you a lot. Buddy's ears twitched slightly. Emily smiled faintly. He said you hated thunderstorms. The retriever blinked. Then rested his chin gently on her knee again. Emily laughed softly. Yeah, that sounds about right. For a few quiet seconds they simply sat there, listening to the wind moving through the trees. Then Emily's expression changed slightly. A thought had surfaced. Wait a second. She looked back at the envelope. Mr. Lawson had written something else. Something she had almost missed. Emily opened the envelope again and pulled the card halfway out. She scanned the final lines once more. And there it was. One small sentence written below the signature. If Buddy chooses to stay with you, I hope you'll let him. Emily's breath caught. She looked down slowly at the retriever. Buddy was already watching her. Calm. Hopeful. Emily felt a quiet laugh escape her. You planned this too, didn't you? Buddy's tail began moving again. Not fast. Just steady. Emily shook her head in disbelief. That old man. She leaned back slightly against the bench. Her mind replayed one of their last conversations. It had been late, almost 3 in the morning. Mr. Lawson had been staring at the window again. Emily had checked his phone and asked casually, "Do you have family nearby?" He had paused before answering. "No, just one word. But not a sad one. More like a peaceful truth." Emily had nodded. "What about friends?" Mr. Lawson had smiled slightly. "Oh, I have one very loyal friend." Emily had chuckled. "Buddy." He had nodded. "He's been my family for a long time." She remembered saying something without thinking. "Well, he's lucky to have you." Mr. Lawson had looked thoughtful. "Maybe." Then he added something quietly. "But I think the real question is whether he'll have someone when I'm gone." Emily hadn't known what to say to that. So she had simply placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You'd be surprised how dogs find the people they need." Mr. Lawson had smiled gently. Now sitting beside Buddy, Emily understood why that smile had felt so certain. She reached down and scratched behind the retriever's ears. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Buddy leaned closer. His tail thumped softly against the gravel. Emily stared at the hospital building in the distance. The glowing windows. The quiet corridors waiting for her return. For the first time in months, something inside her felt lighter. Not because the work had changed, but because the meaning behind it had suddenly become clearer. She thought about the countless patients who had passed through those rooms. The small conversations. The tiny acts of kindness that seemed so ordinary in the moment. Mr. Lawson had seen them, felt them, carried them with him to the end of his life. Emily looked back at Buddy. "You know what?" She stood slowly from the bench. The retriever stood with her instantly. Alert. Hopeful. Emily stretched her tired shoulders. "Well, I still have a few hours left on my shift." Buddy wagged his tail. Emily laughed softly. "But I think the nurse's station might be okay with one visitor tonight." The retriever's ears lifted. Emily bent down slightly and took hold of his collar gently. "Come on, Buddy." She looked once more at the oak tree, the bench, and the quiet park. Then she slipped the envelope safely into her jacket pocket. "Let's go back inside." Buddy walked beside her as they moved along the gravel path. His steps were calm, certain, and as the hospital doors slowly opened ahead of them, Emily realized something important. Mr. Lawson hadn't just left her a thank you message. He had left her a reminder. A reminder that even in the busiest places, even during the longest nights, kindness had a way of traveling farther than anyone expected. Sometimes carried by a letter. Sometimes carried by memory, and sometimes faithfully carried by a dog who refused to let the message be forgotten. The hospital doors slid open with a soft mechanical hum. Warm air flowed out into the cool night. Buddy hesitated for half a second at the entrance. His nose lifted slightly. Hospitals had a very specific scent. Clean chemicals. Fabric. Quiet tension. Emily noticed the pause. She knelt beside him. "It's okay," she whispered gently. Buddy looked up at her. His tail moved once. Then he stepped forward. Together they walked inside. The hallway lights felt brighter after the calm darkness of the park. Footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors. Emily guided Buddy slowly toward the nurse's station. A few night staff members were still moving through the corridor. One of the younger nurses stopped suddenly when she saw the dog. "Emily." Emily smiled faintly. "Hey, Rachel." Rachel blinked in surprise. "Why is there a golden retriever in the hospital?" Buddy stood calmly beside Emily's leg. His posture relaxed. His ears slightly forward, observing everything. Emily reached down and rested her hand gently on his back. "It's a long story." Rachel stepped closer. Buddy's tail wagged slowly when she approached. "Is he yours?" Emily shook her head. "Not exactly." Dr. Morales stepped out of a nearby room at that moment. He froze mid-step. "Is that a dog?" Emily laughed softly. "Yes." Dr. Morales folded his arms, trying to look serious, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I leave you alone for 10 minutes and you start bringing animals into the building?" Buddy looked up at him calmly. His tail thumped once against the floor. Emily pulled the envelope from her jacket. You remember Mr. Lawson? Dr. Morales' expression shifted immediately. The joking tone faded. Room 214? Emily nodded. Rachel glanced between them. What about him? Emily handed the card to Dr. Morales. He left this. Dr. Morales opened it carefully. The hallway grew quiet while he read. Rachel leaned closer. Emily stood beside Buddy, her hand resting gently on his neck. The retriever sat calmly beside her feet. Every now and then his eyes scanned the hallway, still searching, still adjusting to the unfamiliar place. Dr. Morales finished reading. He exhaled slowly. That man. Rachel whispered softly. Did he really train his dog to deliver this? Emily nodded. Buddy's ears twitched when he heard her voice. Dr. Morales looked down at the retriever. Well, he said quietly. He clearly succeeded. Buddy wagged his tail once. Emily crouched slightly and rubbed behind his ears again. Buddy walked me to the bench. Rachel's face softened. That's incredible. For a few moments none of them spoke. The hum of the hospital machines filled the silence. Then Dr. Morales cleared his throat. So what happens now? Emily looked down at Buddy. The retriever looked back up at her. Patient. Trusting. She remembered the final line in the letter again. If Buddy chooses to stay with you, I hope you'll let him. Emily smiled gently. Well, she said slowly, I think he already made that decision. Buddy's tail wagged again. Rachel laughed quietly. He definitely looks comfortable. Dr. Morales handed the card back to Emily. You should keep that. Emily slid it carefully back into the envelope. I will. Buddy stood up and stretched slightly. Then he stepped a little closer to Emily, his shoulder brushing against her leg. A quiet signal. Emily glanced down at him. Still sticking with me, huh? The retriever blinked slowly. Rachel knelt down and offered her hand. Buddy sniffed it politely. His tail moved. But after a second he returned to Emily's side. Rachel smiled. Yeah, he picked his person. Emily felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. The night suddenly felt different. Lighter somehow. The hospital still buzzed with quiet activity. Monitors still beeped. Patients still rested behind closed doors. But something had shifted inside her. A sense of connection she hadn't felt in a long time. Dr. Morales checked his watch. Well, he said gently, I suppose the hospital can make one small exception tonight. Rachel laughed. Best therapy dog we've ever had. Buddy looked up when he heard the word dog. His ears lifted. Emily scratched his neck again. You hear that? Buddy leaned slightly against her hand. The simple gesture made her smile. She hadn't realized how much she needed that small moment of comfort. The hallway felt warmer now. Friendlier. Dr. Morales nodded toward the break room. You can keep him in there while you finish your shift. Emily nodded gratefully. Thank you. She guided Buddy gently down the hallway. The retriever walked calmly beside her. Each step steady. Confident. Inside the break room, Emily filled a small bowl with water. Buddy drank slowly. Then he curled up beside the wall near her chair. Emily sat down. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to relax. The envelope rested on the table in front of her. Mr. Lawson's words still echoed quietly in her thoughts. Kindness travels. She looked down at Buddy. His eyes were half closed now. Peaceful. Content. You know, she said softly, I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Buddy's tail moved once against the floor. Emily leaned back in the chair. Outside the break room, the hospital continued its quiet rhythm. But inside, something gentle had begun to heal. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly, like the first calm breath after a long, exhausting day. And somehow, that healing had arrived on 4 quiet paws. Morning arrived quietly. The first light of dawn slipped through the hospital windows. Soft, pale, gentle. The night shift had begun to slow down. Machines still hummed. Doctors still walked the halls. But the pace had softened, the way it always did when the sun began to rise. Emily leaned back in the chair inside the break room. She hadn't slept. But strangely, she didn't feel exhausted. Buddy lay on the floor beside her, curled comfortably near the wall. His golden fur rose and fell slowly with each breath. Peaceful. Safe. At some point during the night he had drifted into a deep sleep. Emily watched him for a moment. A faint smile touched her face. You had a big night, didn't you? Buddy's ears twitched slightly. But he didn't wake. The envelope still rested on the table beside her coffee cup. Emily had read the letter 3 more times during the night. Each time, a different line seemed to stand out. You reminded me that I was still a person. Or, kindness travels. She carefully picked up the envelope again. Her fingers brushed across the neat handwriting of her name. Felt different now. Not mysterious anymore. Not strange. Just meaningful. The break room door opened quietly. Rachel stepped inside. She carried 2 cups of coffee. One for you, she said softly. Emily smiled gratefully. Thanks. Rachel glanced down at Buddy. He's still here. Emily nodded. Hasn't left my side. Rachel crouched slightly and looked at the sleeping retriever. Well, looks like he made himself comfortable. Emily laughed quietly. I think he did. Buddy stirred slightly. His eyes opened halfway. When he saw Emily sitting there, his tail thumped gently against the floor. Rachel smiled. He definitely picked you. Emily looked down at him. Seems that way. Buddy slowly stood up and stretched. His back arched slightly. Then he walked over and rested his head against Emily's knee. Rachel straightened up. So what happens now? Emily paused. The question hung quietly in the room. She hadn't fully answered it yet. Not out loud. But deep down she already knew. She scratched behind Buddy's ears. Well, she said slowly, I think Mr. Lawson already decided that. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Then I guess the real question is. She smiled. Are you ready for a dog? Emily laughed softly. I've been talking about adopting one for years. Buddy wagged his tail again. Emily looked down at him. Guess the universe decided to speed up the process. Rachel chuckled. Or maybe Buddy did. The hospital hallway began to grow busier outside the break room. Day shift nurses were arriving. Voices drifted through the corridor. Emily finished her coffee and stood up slowly. Buddy stood with her immediately. Faithful. Ready. Rachel watched the moment quietly. You two look like you've known each other forever. Emily glanced down at Buddy. He looked back up at her with those calm, steady eyes. Maybe we have, she said gently. A few hours later, Emily stepped outside the hospital doors again. This time the sky was bright. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees in the park. Buddy walked beside her. His leash hung loosely in her hand now. Not tight. Not forced. Just a gentle connection between them. They followed the same gravel path. The same quiet trail she had walked the night before. The oak tree came into view again. And beneath it, the wooden bench. Emily stopped there. Buddy sat down beside her. The morning breeze moved softly through the leaves above them. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily placed her hand on Buddy's head. You know, this was his favorite place. Buddy looked around the park slowly. His nose lifted slightly in the morning air. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he didn't. But he stayed close. Emily sat down on the bench. The wood creaked softly beneath her. Buddy jumped up beside her this time, settling comfortably against her side. Emily looked out across the peaceful park. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. The city slowly woke around them. But here beneath the oak tree, everything felt calm. She pulled the envelope from her jacket again. Carefully. Respectfully. The letter inside had already begun to soften at the folds from being opened so many times. Emily smiled faintly. Your friend really trusted you. Buddy leaned against her shoulder slightly. His warm fur pressed against her arm. Emily looked down at him. And I think he trusted me too. Buddy's tail moved slowly across the bench. Back and forth. Back and forth. Emily folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Then she placed it safely back into her pocket. The morning sun rose a little higher. Light filtered gently through the branches above them. Emily took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, the weight she carried from the hospital didn't feel quite as heavy. Mr. Lawson had left something behind. Not just a letter. Not just a dog. A reminder. A reminder that the smallest moments, the quiet conversations, the simple acts of kindness, could travel farther than anyone ever realized. Emily looked down at Buddy again. "Well, partner," she said softly. "Looks like it's just you and me now." Buddy lifted his head. His ears perked slightly. Then his tail wagged. "Strong. Happy." Emily laughed quietly. She stood up from the bench. Buddy jumped down beside her. Together they began walking slowly along the park path. Two quiet figures in the morning light. The bond between them still new, but already strong. And somewhere in the peaceful silence of that park, it felt as though Mr. Lawson's gentle story had found the ending he had hoped for. Not with sadness, but with connection, with kindness, and with a loyal golden retriever who had carried one final message exactly where it needed to go.